Good morning, good morning, good morning again, folks. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels, and we are going back to that horrible world known as the JRC. But before we do the disclaimers, if you are new to the Stop the Shocks campaign or the campaign against the troubled teen industry, please go up top there and take a look at the description box. It is an ever growing archive in which the things that we go over on this channel can be found. I want you to note in particular the article written by NeuroClastic, where they surveyed and interviewed over 900 ABA professionals in regards to the Judge Rotenberg Center. An article that disturbed said JRC so much that they threatened NeuroClastic with a defamation lawsuit. They did not remove it from the website. NeuroClastic has refused, so please read that article. Make sure it gets out on all your social media. You also will see included in there their public statement regards to the threat. We got a link to their GoFundMe as well. When we discuss the JRC and places like Agape, you're going to hear vivid descriptions of and as well as catch surveillance images of people with disabilities and mental health issues being tortured and abused. If you got young children present, please use your headphones. Trigger warning, this channel is marked not for kids for a reason. We use profanity on occasion and speak on dark subjects. So if your child is 16 and younger, and they are watching this, very obviously, folks, parental supervision is very much advised. All right, so where we left off. Children harmed by use of aversives have also, through their families, sought redress under the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, the IDEA. Now, folks, I have been educating in regards to the IDEA for going on 14 years now in regards to that. It is a particularly extremely important law that I've been educating on in it for a very long time because it's something that parents need to know, need to internalize, need to know like the back of their hand, because public schools as well as private schools will try to get away with all kinds of things unless you know that law. All right. I have a video of it on my channel. So if you want to go in there and use the search to type in the IDEA, please, folks, take a look at that video. All right. To go into a brief description, the IDEA is a federal law mandating that states provide children with a free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment possible. You see why I've emphasized this particular law for years now, yes? Good. However, courts have held that IDEA, absent any state laws supplementing it, does not require schools to provide best possible education to children with disabilities in order to maximize their potential, but merely to afford them with some meaningful educational benefit. See, this is why you hear me keep harping on the language, getting specific with the language. It's because you have to, folks. Because the reality of this world is, particularly when we're talking special education, and this is not just true for autistics or other neurodivergents, folks. This is true across the board for all of us disabled folk. These people do not view us as human, and as a matter of fact, view it as a complete waste of time and resources to try to educate those of us who are disabled. Okay? I don't want to be in fantasy land here. You shouldn't either, especially if you're parents. Okay? You can't simply just trust the school districts to do what's best for your kid and actually educate them, because they're not, because they don't see the point. They don't think we can be educated. So basically, they just act as babysitters, making sure that they cross all their T's and dot all their I's just enough to not get in trouble. This is why I emphasize that parents need to know the laws like the back of their hand. Because if you are not careful, that is exactly what they'll do. The only reason why it didn't work in my case is because my mom knew she needed to know the law. And they were forced, after my diagnosis, to continue my education as they had been previously, or she was going to come down on them like a ton of bricks. You need to make sure these individuals seeing your kids' education know that you are diligent and you are watching what they're doing. Okay? You have to, because otherwise, that's what they're going to do. I want to dissuade you from this idealized world where educators are truly going to work towards your kids' betterment. Okay? With regards to use of aversives, as it is written, the IDEA does not limit, let alone ban them, and openly requires schools to consider the use of positive behavioral interventions in developing a student with a disabilities IEP. Let me get more specific. There is no language whatsoever in regards to aversives with the IDEA. Okay? It's not even mentioned within that law. The IDEA deals specifically with your kid's right to a full education, not to treatment. I want to say that again, as important as this law is for you to know, it deals specifically with education. It does not whatsoever touch on a child's treatment. Okay? That's what these new bills that we're trying to get through Congress and the Senate address. Okay? Let's move on here. In keeping with their pattern of deference towards schools, the courts have been unwilling to prescribe what interventions a school must choose over others in providing children with a free and appropriate public education. For this reason, for example, in CIN versus Minneapolis Public Schools, the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals refused to find that a student's rights under the IDEA were violated where staff restrained him frequently over the course of the year rather than implementing positive behavioral interventions. Again, because the language is not just not specific enough, it literally doesn't exist. Okay? This is why knowing the laws, what you can sue on and what you can't, is extremely important. Because if you follow a lawsuit in regards to the IDEA and it has to do with improper restraint and excessive aversives, the IDEA is not the law that you need to use to hold them accountable. Okay? The IDEA can be used to hold them accountable in regards to how they proceed with an appropriate and proper public education. But when it comes to aversives and treatment, it does not touch it. Okay? Again, that's why we have the laws that were the bills that we have written, us and several parents, groups, and allies to address, because the laws on the books really don't address them at all. Okay? Even though the court agreed that the restraint was perhaps not the optimal means of addressing his problematic behaviors, it held that this act alone did not make his education inappropriate. You see what I mean? Good, I'm glad you do. In addressing the plaintiff's assertion that in restraining the student, the school had violated several state regulations pertaining to the student rights under the IDEA, the court went on to hold that it was considered to be minor infractions, did not give rise to claim under the IDEA. What did I just tell you? What did I just tell you, folks? We're not viewed as human. We are viewed as walking, talking, breathing inconvenience. Okay? That's a fact. That's why you can't just leave it up to the schools to properly educate your kids and not get involved, because they will simply do nothing but babysit us for 8 hours a day and not even put forth the effort to try and educate us, because they don't think we can be educated. Okay? And more often than not, the courts will always refer to the schools as the professionals and defer to their expertise. Okay? This is why the current laws do not work and act as zero protection, where the IDEA might be used to be able to call your school into account to properly educate the disabled person. It's got no sway, none whatsoever, in regards to whether your kids' human rights are being respected or not. All right, let's continue. Overall, it refused to rule in such a way that would absolutely prohibit the use of restraint, as doing so would curtail the ability of the schools to address problematic student behavior before it reached a level requiring the student's outright exclusion from the school by means of suspension, which it considered to be a worse outcome than restraint. You see where we're going here? What have I told you about these public schools and their special ed departments? They are unequipped, folks. Most school districts might have one, possibly two individuals who work for their special ed departments. They are severely underfunded and overwhelmed by just how many students are in their classrooms. They are not properly equipped or properly funded to be able to address those of us with disabilities who have some behavior issues that crop up. They don't have the education and they don't have the resources. Okay? That's just a fact. So, what do they rely on? They rely on restraint, they rely on seclusion, and they keep doing that until it is clear that that's not going to work. But the problem is, instead of addressing the parents and referring them to get their child to a full functional assessment, what ends up happening is the school goes to the school board. The school board gets funding, and then the can gets kicked down the road as the kid goes from special ed school to special ed school to special ed school, until eventually they get sent to a place like the JRC, where the homework doesn't get done because this severely underfunded and extremely exhausted special ed department at that point doesn't know what else to do. This is why you have to be on top of your teachers and your school district parents. I can't emphasize this enough. Okay? Because we live in a day and age now where schools will withhold information from parents on various levels, for neurotypical kids and disabled kids alike. You have to know what's going on in your kid's classroom. We live in an age where you cannot be naive and simply trust the schools to do what's best for your kids. I hate to tell you all that, but you have to be on top of them. Because if there is no communication with your kids' teachers, then you end up in a situation where the kids that are stuck in places like Agape and JRC have gone from school to school to school with nothing really being done and nothing being effective because there was no full functional assessment. And these individuals don't even realize what it is that they are trying to treat. Okay? They go to things like restraint and seclusion rooms because these people don't know what else to do. They are not educated in these areas the way that we would want them, and a lot of people think that they are. They don't have the resources to be able to get that additional education necessary to know what's going on. Okay? That's why places like my rural podunk school, instead of being arrogant and trying to throw things at us and then eventually giving up and kicking the can down the road, went directly to my mother, and then the full functional assessment got done. Okay? We're going to go ahead and close out on that. We don't get very many views on this channel. The few that we do tend to get removed from time to time. So please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe, and don't forget to hit the comments. I do appreciate your time this morning. And as always, folks, we here at Spilling Tea hope you have a good one. Bye-bye, everyone.